disciplining your child.
Disciplining your child. So let's elaborate on point number one, and that was never give an order that you cannot enforce.
Correct.
Right? And that's actually very, very important. First of all, what you really want to think about is when you give an order that you cannot enforce right then and there. In other words, let's say you're in a public place and you don't feel comfortable. Let's say it's somewhere where you have to be quiet. Maybe it's a lecture, you're participating, and somehow you have your child with you, or something like that, and you cannot take the time out to say right there, hey Johnny, I told you not to do this, now you're in trouble. Like for some reason you cannot enforce it right then and there. There's a couple of things you can do actually, but basically if you don't have the teeth to follow up with, then leave that one alone. Because if you give your child an order, no, remember we're talking about a child that's somewhat defiant. All the things we're talking about last week and this week, this is more for somebody who has a child that they're always at odds with. The child is always doing the wrong thing. Right? If you have a cooperative child, most of these points will probably not be that pertinent. Right?
Yes.
So when you give an order that you cannot enforce, what you're really teaching your child is that there's absolutely no consequence to ignoring you.
But you also have to pick and choose your battles.
You have to pick and choose your battles, right? You only really, especially if it's the more defiant the child, the more you have to make sure that you're able to create some kind of a control situation that allows you to then follow up with. And we're going to, there's actually a term that I kind of coined with this because I'm trying to describe that in my own head, and what am I going to call that? Well, it's what I would call creative anticipatory discipline training. Big word, right? that makes me sound really smart. Creative anticipatory. In other words, you have to anticipate this is going to happen, have a creative solution for it, and that's how you're going to train your child to be more disciplined, right? Or to follow your orders, so to speak. So what that usually involves is creating a specific reward and also having conditioning the reward to the desired behavior. I'm going to explain that more in a moment, but let's say that your child is always interrupting you when you have a conversation with another adult. Right? What happens to most people is that it gets annoying.
Yes, it
Right? You tell your child don't do that, but you don't want to, because you're in the conversation, you don't want to stop your conversation completely.
To
So
tell him not.
yeah, you're trying to go back and forth, trying to kind of like chew your child just a little bit. You're trying to correct your child, but that doesn't totally work. It might like have an effect for about 5 seconds, and now every 5 seconds you're going back and forth.
Exactly.
Right? So the first thing you got to do about this is you got to change your mindset. You have to change your mindset. You have to really, if this is something that happens regularly, you have to expect it to happen. That's the first thing. You got to expect that this is going to happen again, but you don't want to do that fearfully or being, dreading it. You have to actually change your mindset and look at this as an opportunity. It is a training opportunity. We do that in martial arts all the time, and we practice for, let's say, a competition, where it's like a point fight competition, right? You might say like, well, every time I do my back knuckle, the person blocks it, right? To a beginner, that is a problem. To a pro, that is an opportunity. Because the pro is going to go like, well, you mean every time I do A, my opponent does B? Well, that means I can predict my opponent. I can set him up. Right? Instead of looking at it as a problem, you can change your mindset and you can look at this as an opportunity, because now you have actually the ability to like foretell the future, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you an example actually, and that's going to be, now please understand, we're not comparing anybody's child to a dog, but the principles that you use when you train a dog are actually very similar it's compared to the principles that you use when you work with a child.
We had Grace here last week
Yes.
from the SPCA, and she agreed with that totally.
Yes, because it's not about who you're training, it's about the trainer.
Yes,
Or
exactly.
the teacher. And a lot of times what we do wrong is we might not be consistent, or we might not be clear about our orders, or we might not have the right consequence. And we are intelligent beings, and it doesn't take that much for, again, it's like the stoveplate example. It doesn't take that much for a child to start calculating, okay, when I put my hand on it, it's going to hurt, so I'm not going to do that anymore. So I'm going to give you a little correlating example here. We have a dog. It's a little rat terrier chihuahua mix named Cece.
Yes, Cece.
Which we actually got from the pound. That's where she adopted us.
Yes, exactly.
We were looking for a dog, and she was the one who stuck her paw out of the cage and said hello to us. What we do, because she's a small dog, we don't take her for a walk all that much. We just let her out the front door together with another small poodle that we have, right? and we just let them go and do their business out in the front yard, right?
Mhm.
So what happens is that Cece actually is trained to come on command.
Yeah, she's.
When I call her, she comes on command, right? However, she gets very territorial of our front yard.
Yeah, she does.
So when somebody walks by or rides their bicycle, right, on the sidewalk or even on the street, when Cece is outside, and she's always outside, we're always outside with her, right? We don't let her out there by herself. But she will chase whoever is walking by or whoever is
Not
riding by.
necessarily to bite, she just chases them.
Right, right. She just chases them and just to bark, right? Well, that's something that, now she's running down the neighborhood though. If it's somebody on a bicycle kind of moving
Yes,
fast.
I've heard you've had to run like a
Yes.
couple blocks around
Yes,
the corner to go
that-
get her.
That happens to me, on a few occasions I have to actually chase her down, which is really not a situation you want to be in, right?
Yes.
But that's something that we really have to fix with her.
Yes, 'cause
And-
she could get hit by a car, she could, a
Exactly.
dangerous situation. there.
Exactly. And so really, how do we fix that? And if you think about it, there was like 3 different possible ways that you can respond to this. Number 1, you can hope that it's somehow going to fix itself. And you can keep on going through the same scenario, again and again.
Isn't that the definition of insanity?
That is the definition of insanity, continuing to use the same methods and expecting a different result. And so that's not going to work too well. That's just going to get you aggravated. Right? Now, the second option is what we talked about a moment ago, and that is change your mindset and expect it to happen.
I guess another option would be just keep her on a leash, but that's so inconvenient.
Right. And now, what we want to keep in mind with that also, by the way, is that this is what dog trainers do. The way you get your dog to comply is you first have them on a leash, and then, of course, let's say
The goal is to make sure they can be command off the leash too.
Exactly. So you actually have to trick your dog into that. A lot of dogs get what's called leash smart.
Oh, okay.
Right? They know when you unclip the leash, and then they know now that nothing applies anymore. Right?
Okay.
So the way to bridge that is once you have your dog trained on a leash, and a lot of times you even do it with a long leash. Let's say you have a 30, 40-foot leash, and then you tell your dog, come here, and then you snap the leash, right, until your dog gets it, right? Well, now the next thing to do is to replace that leash with something that doesn't look like a leash, something that tricks the dog. You use usually a long fishing line.
Mhm.
You have let's say a 20 or 30-foot fishing line on a little clip, and you hook that to your dog's collar, so your dog isn't really aware of the fact that he or she is on a leash.
Okay.
And, that works really, really well. So you basically have somewhat of an invisible leash now. Right? So if your dog tries to run away from you, or doesn't, or you're trying to catch your dog, and then your dog tries to run away from you, you just step on that fishing line, so your dog can't escape anymore. And now you can reel your dog in, and you can correct the dog.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and that's exactly how we do it with Cece. Every time that she's chasing after somebody, I can now, catch her really easily, right? And I can punish her right away. Okay. And see, that's running after the dog isn't going to work because, and I tried that once, right?
You'll never catch her.
You never catch the dog, and now it takes you 10 minutes to catch the dog, and when you finally
They
catch,
think it's a game.
right? Or they're really confused. The dog might go because maybe you're probably going to be upset now. You're yelling at the
I
dog.
don't want to come at you.
Right. And what happens is when let's say you do finally catch your dog, the opportunity to punish the dog for the original act has passed already. It's too late. Because if you now punish your dog is going to link that punishment to the wrong action. In other words, your dog is going to think, all right, never let my owner catch me, because when my owner catches me, I'm in trouble.
Mhm.
All right? They're not going to go, oh, it was because of the thing when I chased the bicycle 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. The dog is not going to make that connection, right?
Mhm.
So fishing line training it is for the dog. Okay, it's very effective.
Now I assume we can't do that with a
No,
4 or
no,
5-year-old.
no. But the
Can't
reason
put
why
them on a fishing line.
that's right. We have not attempted that one. Now the reason why we bring that up is because it illustrates a principle.
Mhm.
It illustrates a principle. You changed your mindset. You're expecting this to happen, and you're prepared. Right? And by the way, there is a third way to handle this, which is much more it's much more rapid. And this is what a professional dog trainer would do. Remember the term, I don't even remember the term, what was that? An anticipatory training, right? Creative anticipatory training. What a dog trainer would do is they would do exactly the same thing. They would have that fishing line, but now they also would have a friend that's going to cooperate with them, and that friend is going to ride by your house every 5 minutes on a bicycle.
Now I think we have to take a break, so we're
Mhm.
gonna have